We got 1 minute. Turn the lamp on. My soft light, my mood lighting. Man, it's a gorgeous evening. I don't know if anybody can tell, but man, I gotta tell you something. It is like stunning outside. Can you see that view? You see that? You see the mountains out there? Oh my gosh, it's epic. And it's 6:30 and it's time for Rex. I will put away my classical guitar radio on Pandora. I figure that, you know, individuals might find that a little more to the liking. He's either that or some Iron Maiden, maybe some late 80s Megadeth, Hangar 18, one of my personal Megadeth favorite albums. Anyway, so for those of you who don't know, I'll tell you a little funny story. I was actually the lead singer in a metal band. So we were called the Otis Roach Band, and we did Pantera, early Metallica like Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, some Iron Maiden, what else? Some Glenn Danzig. We did a bunch of stuff. It was a lot of fun, man. And then, you know, over time, I just realized I just wasn't that angry of a person. I had a really good relationship with my dad. And so, like, I mean, maybe that once all that testosterone kind of faded off as I got older, I was like, nah. But I always loved what I didn't realize is how much, particularly if you listen to a lot of like European metal, how much a lot of those classical overtones that you'll figure out, those really classical scales that, that you would typically find not just in Judas Priest, but in there was for those there was a metal band called Accept back in the day with Unum Dofschneider was like the lead singer, and but if you listen to these early 80s like metal bands that came out of Europe, they had these really amazing classical overtones. As I began to listen to those scales, I'd go back and like you were listening to this, I was listening to some Spanish guitar here. You realize how much of that intense scale manipulation took place in the metal, only with a lot more aggression. But I will acquiesce for now. Well, welcome to Rex. We're working from home. We got another Zoom meeting going on today. We're going to be talking to. I could be wrong, but this does not sound like 80s music. You're right. That was like, unless you're talking about like the 1780s Spanish guitar. Thanks, Cody. All right. So we're going to be talking about disclosures, and I appreciate everybody coming in. So I'll be doing a lot of share screen. Excellent. Oh, I got to put my computer on Do Not Disturb so I don't get a bunch of little bells and whistles and a bunch of things going on. So if you guys want to participate, just so you know, a couple house cleaning things. I don't need to point out where the bathrooms are because we're not doing so don't worry about that. But if you guys want to make a comment, you're more than welcome to. When you join in, it'll automatically mute your mic. I make sure that you continue to mute your mic. If you want to participate, you want to say something, just look for an opportunity. Or if you want to ask a question, drop it into the chat box, and I'll continue to chat. Sometimes when I'm going through stuff, what I'll do is I'll stop, pause, reference back, and go back into the chat box to answer questions. But today we're going to be dealing with disclosures, okay? And it's a lot to cover, actually, when you think about what kind of due diligence and what you're looking for when you're looking for investment properties. And this is a critical part. That due diligence period or that investigation period where you dig into a property, right? It's critical to make sure that you have the information that are necessary to make sure you're making a wise decision. And we're talking about some of those things that you should be, or the most important things that you should be investigating and digging into. And more importantly, what are your responsibilities as both a buyer and seller regarding these disclosures, okay? And we're also going to be referencing some of the Alaska state law into what the responsibilities of individuals, of the individual parties are regarding disclosures, okay? So the first thing to understand is in Alaska, we are very much a buyer-friendly state when it comes to buying investment properties or any kind of property. It's really interesting, though, in that most of these buyer protections take place only when, more strongly, when it is a resale, which means a standard seller to a buyer like than if it was an REO. In fact, what a lot of people don't realize is that REO companies and individuals that take properties through foreclosures are exempt from a lot of the disclosure requirements that typical sellers are. So you need to be very, very careful when buying foreclosed properties. Now, your question would be, why are banks and why are these individuals exempt? Simply because they've never lived in the property. Remember that REO properties, real estate owned, basically a bank, they were just a lender. They were basically all they did was lend somebody money. They've never been in the property. They know very little. And in fact, they prefer to know very little about a property. Okay. So when you investigate a property or do your due diligence, a lot of the onus will fall on you as a buyer because you don't have the protections and you don't have the requirements that a standard seller would have to disclose things to you. For instance, it is not the seller's requirement on an REO property to notify you of any EPA or DEC known issues. That is your job to look it up. Okay. They're exempt, okay? So you got to be really careful when buying REO properties, and this is really, and what's great about this is if you're looking for a great deal and you think that you're going to find it in a foreclosure, you may not. And a lot of what makes a foreclosure a great deal is what do you know about it, what is the condition, and how much has been disclosed to you. And if you don't know your due diligence, you don't know what to look out for, you should be very, very concerned. So today's lesson is going to help you a lot as a consumer buying REOs and knowing what to look for on your own, but also as a seller knowing what you should disclose and what your responsibilities are, or as a buyer just looking to buy a standard property that's on the market, what you should be investigating, things that you should inquire about, where you should ask additional questions, And then we'll also talk a little bit about the liabilities of properties or individuals regarding properties if they fail to disclose or if something is just simply overlooked. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover. So first thing that's really important is to understand what is the basis by of which all our basic disclosures are based off, and they're going to be based off Alaska statutes. Now, if you want, it's really easy because all you have to do is put in Alaska real estate disclosure law. And if you put that into your Google browser, it'll take you right to the state website, the Alaska Legal Resource Center, and it'll go right into helping you understand what the requirements are of individual parties. So I'm just going to show you where to find that real quick on your screen and just show you that it's not overly complicated. Okay. I'm going to show you where we go into investigating these items such as legal disclosures. And it's really good that we start off with a basis of what does the law say, because it really is up to Alaska state law. So what I've got here is I've gone right up, and I'll just go back away. Alaska real estate disclosure law. All I did was Google it, and boom, first one that's not a paid ad, the Alaska statutes. Fantastic. And what we do is that you can see that here are 10 different sections that regard, and I think there's 10, yeah, there might be 11, but 10 different sections, and they're not overly complicated, okay? Disclosures in real estate property transfers, and you'll see here, if you just go into it, and it tells you real quick, hey, before the transfer of an interested party in real estate makes a written offer, the transferor may deliver by mail or in person a completed written disclosure form under AS. Okay, what is the disclosure form and what does it have in it? Okay, we're going to go over that form. The most important thing I want to talk about here is disclosures, liability after disclosure. Let's talk a little bit about why it's important to disclose material information regarding the physical condition of a property and what the state is requiring. Okay, and let me bring up my chat box just in case anybody has a question real quick for the chat box. All right. Again, we're going to cover what the state says an individual has to do. First off, residential disclosures for residential real property sales. What is the most of this sentence right here, this disclosure, what is the most important thing that we would have to ask ourselves regarding disclosures in residential property sales is, what is a residential property? Wouldn't it make sense that you would want to know what a residential property is before? Well, residential property, technically, according to Alaska statutes, is a duplex or smaller. It's not a triplex. It's not a fourplex. It's not a fiveplex. It is a duplex and single family home, which an individual has lived in and not rented in the last 2 years. Meaning that if it has been a rental property for the last 2 years, and they've never lived in it, it's no longer a residential, it's an investment. So we can get caught in these caveats. It says this website was last modified in 2005. There have been any changes since then that are relevant? Not so much. I mean, it's still, you know, that's an excellent question, but you'll see that a lot of the standard forms we have still reference these Alaska state laws. So first off is you got to realize that what is a residential property? And then what are some of the liabilities after disclosure? Okay, the transfer is not liable for a defect or condition of real property interest being transferred. It discloses the existence. Okay, this is important, okay? A transfer is not liable for a defect or other condition if it discloses the existence or defect prior to a disclosure. Now, here's where this is where people get hung up on. We're going to go over a residential property transfer disclosure statement. It's going to ask a lot of questions. It's 8 pages, and there's a lot of information in there. And it's provided to a buyer, and a buyer typically will initial it or sign off on it. And it's so important that you read it. There's a condition in there that says, has there ever been any water on the property? And if they say yes, there's been water in the crawl space. And they don't give any other, yes, there was crawl space and water in the crawl space 7 years ago. And they don't give any other explanations, but they disclosed it to you and you buy that house. And then 6 months, a year later, you've got, or who knows, maybe sooner, you suddenly have a bunch of water in your crawl space and you have a big issue and you go back and go, you never told me. All they have to do is revert back to the disclosure and say, yes, I told you there'd been water in the crawl space. Well, why didn't you say it had been this bad? Well, maybe it's never been that bad in the past. The fact is they disclosed it. So it's important for you to read that. And if you see something where they don't give further explanations, like there's water in a crawl space, or I had an issue here, or that is, you should be seeking further explanations, because vague statements, okay, do not allude to how that issue is properly corrected. So one of the things that we're looking at on that is that if anything that was disclosed to them, even if it's vague, right, they're not liable for any. I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen a couple of times. Yes, there was moisture here. Yes, I saw an issue, and then we just assume everything's fine. You don't understand the gravity of the situation, and then you find out the whole place needs French drains or something. Okay, so it's very important to take a look at those items. We'll go into that a little bit more. So what else? So one is understand, it says, hey, if they disclose the existence of a defect, even partial, prior to closing, they're not liable. Okay. Nope. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Subsequent events, approximations, form of good disclosure, effect, written addendum, failure to comply. Okay, this is a good one. If an individual fails to comply, a transfer that is subject to this chapter is not invalidated solely because a person fails to comply with this chapter. And a person who negligently violates this chapter or fails to perform a duty required by this chapter liable to the transferee in the amount of actual damages. Plus, you'll see down here, willfully, up to 3 times the actual damage suffered by the failure. Now, it's important to note that there's a statute of limitations on these, okay? So what does that mean? That means if you suffer damages because someone hid a disclosure, hid a material information regarding the physical condition of property, or you as a seller failed to disclose when specifically asked in a residential property transfer disclosure statement, or through your requirement to provide material information regarding the physical condition of the property, and you failed to convey that information, the statute of limitations is 2 years. After 2 years, it's assumed that, don't ask me why it's so short, because some large items don't show up for much longer than that. But the point being that they have 2 years that they can come back and sue you, not only for the defect, but then 3 times actual damages, okay? Plus attorney fees. You don't want to go down that road, okay? I always encourage people just disclose, right? Whenever you have any kind of report or anything, just make sure that you provide it to any other party that's involved with it. Okay, so your best way not to end up you may not think that something is important, but that's not a decision for you to make. That is a decision for the purchaser to make, whether or not they feel as if it's important. What about doing a 4-plex in 4 separate single family homes, still residential? No. Actually, 4 units on 1 lot, regardless if they're 4 individual houses, is still considered a multiplex. 4 units or larger, it's probably being appraised as a 4-plex. However, just because the municipality or just because the state does not call it a residential property, does not mean that you don't have to request a residential property transfer disclosure statement. I've done this before, many, many times. I realize this disclosure form technically and may not apply towards a 4-plex or 5-plex, or maybe even up to 6 units. But I want to know, because there's a lot of really good information in there regarding the property that I would want to ascertain, regardless of the fact that this specific form was designated for a different kind of property. It is perfectly okay for you, when you're bringing an offer, to request an individual that owns a triplex, 4-plex, or larger to fill out, to the best of their ability and in good faith, a residential property transfer disclosure statement, okay? Now, I will tell you that just because there's a lot of great questions in there doesn't mean that they have all the answers. It's still important to get a home inspection, right? Okay, so just a little bit. If you have any questions regarding the law, we'll just take a look at the law, and then we're going to revert back to the residential property transfer disclosure statement. So when somebody brings an offer and they see a property out that's on the market, this is the very first form that you should be looking at, okay? This is before title report, before as-built, before any of this stuff. We're gonna go right into the residential property transfer disclosure statement, and I'm gonna bring that up on the screen here. Let me find my screen where it is. Amendment, no, that's not it. Ah, here it is. All right, we're gonna go back to the beginning. All right, let me do share screen and we're gonna go through it. So whenever you're buying a residential property transfer, typically, if it's listed by a real estate licensee in the state of Alaska, you will see a form of this magnitude or something that's similar to it. Different boroughs and stuff have variations of this form. They're all very similar, but some of them have stuff that's pertinent to their to their borough. So some of the questions may change, but there are specific questions that are in here that are required to be asked per state law. And that's why they kind of follow this form. Now I will tell you that a lot of people, I'm gonna divest just a little bit. I'm gonna sidetrack here just for a second and let you know that one of the biggest frustrations I have as a real estate licensee is that when I send a contract to somebody and they take it and they bastardize it and they send it to their attorney who maybe does 3 or 4 real estate transactions a year, and they come back with their own forms. The forms that we use in Flex have been vigorously vetted by not just the Alaska Real Estate Commission, but by state attorneys and by more attorneys than you could ever afford to ever put together into a pool, and successfully closed thousands of real estate and hold up in court thousands of times. Okay, so if you're looking because you want your own attorney to look these over and you want to recreate the wheel, you're welcome to. But I doubt that they will be as thorough as these are, unless you're talking about some hybrid form of a property where you're talking about, strip malls and things like that, where, there's different commercial contracts and maybe there's some small caveats that go in there. But I will tell you that our real estate transactions and our forms that we have in Flex MLS, what they've been through, you're going to have trouble. Like, I understand wanting to have your attorney review them. But if he's rewriting these contracts and trying to come up with something, first off, understand that the other real estate real estate licensees are going to back off. They're probably not going to want to deal with you or deal with you very limited, because we know these contracts. It's an industry standard, and we kind of have an idea of what, there's an expectation. And so it's not always a good thing to have I always say have an attorney review it, but I would say that if you want things to go smoothly for you, try to avoid recreating the wheel and taking these forms and putting it in your own contract and sending it back to another client. Now, if you have real estate professionals involved, I'll tell you that I'll automatically give them red flags. Okay, so not that you can't do it, I would just be very cautious because it's going to create some headaches. I've literally had clients terminate. I had a great offer, submit it to a seller came back but rewrote the offer through their attorney forms, and they just said, no, I don't want to deal with anything. This looks foreign to me. I don't know what it is. Just terminate. I don't want to deal. Obviously, this person is just trying to create issues where there isn't any. There's nothing wrong with the forms that we sent over. And you don't want that to happen. You want to get off on a good start. So let's go and take a look at these disclosure forms and see what the first thing is. So we've got our residential property. So this is our first form. And here's our first. I'm just trying to pick this up here. Okay. This is the first form. As you can see, if I shrink this down a little bit, we're going to go through these forms one by one. Okay. You can see that there is, 8 pages, I believe, on this one. I'm going to blow it up. Okay. We're going to read through this just like anything. It's not too sexy, but I want to make sure that we understand what it is. Okay. The state law right here, AS 70-010, requires that before the transferring buyer, hereafter is buyer, of an interested residential property makes a written offer, the seller must deliver a completed written disclosure form. It concerns residential property located in, and it says location, recording district, and the judicial district, right? Which is the third. Anchorage is the third judicial. What is a legal property? What is a property address? Right here. What is a residential property? A real property means any single family dwelling or 2 single family dwelling units. That means under one roof, there's a duplex, or any individual unit in a multi-structure or common ownership community whose primary purpose is to provide housing. That means a condo. That's what they mean. When they say an individual unit in a multi-unit structure with common interest, that means a condo. So these forms, and this form typically through state requirements, typically is only required for single family duplexes and condos. Does it mean that you can't use this on other properties? No. It just means that this is the form that standard that they understand and the law recognizes those are specifically residential properties per state law. Okay. Let me just make sure I have my chat in case anybody has a question. All right. Given the definition of residential, we got a question here from Eric. Given the definition of residential, is there a standard form for a commercial multifamily, or do the lawyers get involved there? No, I mean, as far as a standard residential, you will be surprised. Guys, I've used the residential purchase and sell contract for properties up to like 24 units. It's very thorough. And when you read through the terms of a contract, now, when we get into commercial properties, because I've sold things like a 20,000 square foot warehouse, or, you know, I've sold 3 strip malls on one piece of property, then yeah, I mean, there actually is a commercial real estate purchase and sell agreement that's available in the MLS. Not a lot of real estate licensees understand that. There actually is a commercial non-residential contract that's provided. However, you know, that's where when you listen, when you get into a $2.5 to $3 million advantageous at that point to bring an attorney and take a look at it, because you know you might be talking about a $50,000 to $60,000 earnest money, right? And so you know, then at that point it might constitute hiring an attorney to review those contracts. Okay, but let's stay on this disclosure right here and just take a look at this. And it goes into this. Okay. Provides that a disclosure statement or material delivered to the transferee has made a written offer. The transferee may terminate this offer by delivering written notice. Okay, so once you receive this, you have 3 days. Basically, that's what it's saying. You have 3 days to terminate. If you wrote your contract and you've been in contract for 3 weeks and they finally get around to sending you this completed, you still get 3 days. Even if it's after you do your due diligence period. If your due diligence period has come and gone and they have failed to finish this and complete it, and it was missing signatures, and you get it a week before you're to close, you still get a 3-day window to get out because it's considered a new disclosure because it wasn't completed. This is why it's so important that I say real estate, we're not in a real estate business, we're in a contracts business, okay? Now it says, again, the law says that this provides that if an item that must be completed in the disclosure statement is unknown or unavailable to the seller, and if the seller's agent has made reasonable effort to ascertain the information, the seller can make an approximation based on its best information to the seller and the seller's agent. It must be reasonable, clearly labeled as an approximation, and not used to avoid the disclosure requirements. What this means is they may ask a question that you don't know, and you can just say, well, I asked, I went online. If you don't know, I don't know is not an excuse. You have to make a reasonable effort, okay? If it was not, so here's where it gets ugly, okay? This is where it can get very tricky. If you have if you're buying a property and you're working and you have a buyer's licensee, and you have your own licensee, or let's say that there's a listing license, either case, there's a listing licensee on the property, and you're buying a foreclosed property, and you as a buyer are buying it, okay? What do we know about foreclosures? One, there's no disclosures because the bank has never owned it. Does that mean they don't know anything about the property? Maybe. How can, and you guys put this in the chat box, how can your licensee or how can the listing licensee make a reasonable attempt to find out the history of this property and any previous disclosures before you buy it? Anybody? I don't see anything in the chat box. I'll give you 3, 2, 1. Given the definition of residential, is there a standard form? Okay, that was the same question. Google. Nope, you're close, Dustin. I know I like what you're trying. Find a previous owner to put his gun to his head. Nope, through previous disclosures. Cody's close. Guys, the MLS has a history. You have a history on this property. Okay, let me show you. I'm going to share screen with you guys. You guys ready? Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give me just a second. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to log in real quick, and then I'm going to share. You may or may not be able to see this in here, but I'm here. Okay. So here's a property. This is my house. Whenever we do any kind of stuff, because I want to respect, we are a non-disclosure state, and I don't want to jeopardize. So please don't mind. I got no problem. I'll use my property. I'm going to show you something. Okay. This is what your licensee sees when they're looking online. This is what's known as a. We're going to blow this up a little bit. Oh, the wrong one. This is a sale of a property. You may not be able to see it, but this is the not so sexy part that a realtor sees. They see, okay, when was it? What did it close? Where is it at? What kind of property? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? What is the information on here? Like, what is all this? Well, what a licensee can do is they can go into history and they can see when this property was previously listed. They can go back and see that, hey, I bought this property, but here it was in 2006 when the guy bought it as land. I look at the land listing, I go back, and can I reasonably and find disclosures? Yes, I can go in here, find history, and perhaps use disclosures. No real disclosures here. Well, I can go back to 2017 when he tried to sell it. Hey, look, here it is. Oh, look, there's documents, and in the documents, there's a property disclosure from 2017. Now, let's say I bought the property as a foreclosure. Well, guess what? There may not be a disclosure now, but right here online in Flex is the disclosure from 2017, right? Here's all the information you would want to know. So the point is, just because there's not a disclosure, the seller and the seller's licensee has to make reasonable effort. Meaning that if there's a history of the sale and they're a realtor and they have access to these disclosures, they're supposed to provide those to you. It's very simple. And I've had licensees go and list a property and a seller fills it out and it's got errors or omissions in it. And I run into this as a broker. And then you have a buyer who's all upset, and we go back and we look to where they tried to sell it 3 years ago, and the disclosure reveals some things that maybe were not so attractive. Oh, that's dangerous. Or maybe you're the new seller. Maybe you've only owned this property 3 years. You're like, well, here's what I know about it from 3 years, while I've known this stuff for the last 3 years. But isn't it reasonable to say that you received a disclosure from the previous seller when you bought it? Absolutely. You should disclose those defects. Okay. So again, you have to make forth a reasonable effort to disclose those, and your licensee will go back and double check other disclosures to make sure that a buyer is getting the full picture. Okay. Let's say, look at the previous disclosures to when it was sold previously. Eric Swanson, you're exactly right. That's exactly right. Eric got on the nose. All right, let's go back and take a look at, let me find the window where I was looking at the disclosure. All right. Go ahead and close this one out. Let me find the one that we're on. Here we go. All right, very good. Hold on just 1 second. Oh, I hope I didn't close this meeting out. Oh, there we are. All right, very good. I got about 11 windows open, so now I just got to go back and find the one I was on. All right, let's go back and finish reading the disclosure. All right. By the way, that's great information for you guys buying REOs and stuff. Just because they don't have a disclosure, you should be, this is the great thing about working with a real estate professional. By the way, if you are not using a real estate professional, a licensed professional to buy an REO, okay, and you're buying it direct, you won't have somebody who can, with the ability to go back through the previous sales history, because MLS is proprietary information to licensees to get you the secret squirrel information that's hidden in the back. So just know that that's one of the advantages of making sure you have representation. They can do a lot of research on previous sales if there's any old disclosures. Otherwise, you just may be missing this information, okay? All disclosures in the statement are required to be made in good faith, okay? The seller is required to disclose defects or other conditions of the real property or the real property transfer or the real property interested being transferred. To comply, disclosure need not include search of public records. So they don't need to search public records. What kind of stuff do we have in public records? Okay, it means that sexual offenders, they just got to tell you where to go to look for sexual offenders. They're not required to go find sexual offenders for you. They're not required to go find meth labs in the area. That's your responsibility. Okay, that's public records of areas around it. They're only required specifically regarding that property. Okay, they also are not required to do a professional inspection of the property. They're not required. Okay. The information supplied in this disclosure statement becomes inaccurate as a result of an act or agreement after the disclosure statement is delivered to the buyer. The seller is required to deliver an amendment to the disclosure statement. Okay, so what kind of stuff? Well, there's never been water in the crawl space, but while we've been in contract, one of the rain gutters came disconnected. It was discharging water right next to the foundation for the first time in 20 years. I got water in the crawl space. Guess what? They have to amend it in writing and provide it to the buyer. And upon delivery to the buyer, any inspection reports generated by this purchase agreement and this property automatically becomes an addendum to the property disclosure. Okay, this is important. Upon delivery to a buyer, any inspection reports generated by a purchase agreement, that means both buyer and seller, of this property automatically becomes an addendum or amendment to the purchase disclosure. Guys, if you're a buyer and you get an inspection on a property, the seller that inspection moving forward. You can't get mad and say they used my inspection to get a better price. Maybe, maybe not. But they're required by law to disclose any inspection reports to any future buyers. Okay. First transfer of an interest in residential real property that has ever been occupied is exempt. So that means that if it's new construction, this form does not apply. New construction houses, which is the very first time it's been sold, is not required to use this form. And you may waive this under mutual agreement. In which, okay, what are some cases in which an individual may waive receiving a residential property transfer disclosure statement? Okay, why would they waive it? Well, one is maybe it's an estate sale. Maybe it's the kids selling grandma's home. And although it's been in the family for years, the fact is grandma lived by herself in this house for the last 15 and they don't know what grandma did, right? So there's some situations where they may be selling a property that they at one point lived in, maybe when they were kids, but now they're selling it and it doesn't apply. So we can agree to waive it. Other times you see this waiver if it's a flip property because they haven't lived in it. But even if it is a rehab or flip property, you may request in your contract they fill this out anyway, just because, heck, they just went through the property with the contractors and a fine-tooth comb. You're going to tell me they don't know most of these answers, right? I mean, seriously. I mean, you obviously replaced all the outlets, replaced all that. You're going to tell me that you don't know the age of the heating system? Like, if you're flipping the property, you don't know how old the heating system are, you suck as a property flipper. So you may just inquire and have a property flipper fill this out just to make sure that you know what's going on with it. Failure to comply, and again, this is a person who negligently violates or fails to perform a duty required. Again, they're liable up to 3 times actual damages. In addition to the damages, a court may also award the cost of attorney fees to the extent allowed under the rules of the court. All right. So now we get into the questions. What kind of questions? First is just the basics. What kind of property is it? Single family? Is it a condo? Is it zero lot line? Do they currently occupy the property and how long have they lived in it? If not a current occupant, have you ever occupied the property and how long ago did you live in it? What year was the property built? And if it was built prior to 1978, is there a lead-based paint addendum? Right now, if you guys remember our contract class we took we did over the last 2 Rex meetings, what do we know about a lead-based paint addendum? Yeah, if it's not completed, if a lead-based paint addendum, this required pamphlet, is not acknowledged by the buyer prior to them writing an offer, that contract is not enforceable. Yeah, it's an easy out. It's an easy out for a buyer. How is negligence proven or demonstrated? Who has the burden of proof? Well, I mean, that's a great question for the attorney when you talk about and I guess when you say how is negligence proven? So in this one, someone who negligently violates or fails to perform a duty required under. So let's see what this is. Okay. Let's look at this. Check only those items that have known defects, malfunctions, or have major repairs in the last 5 years. If you don't check anything, but you have a carport and it's obvious that it's sagging and the guy has gone in there and done some makeshift crap with deck screws, some deck mates, and some untreated lumber, and then covered over it with paint, okay? And then doesn't disclose it, and then some guy parks underneath it and it collapses on his car, and he goes, wait a second, it looks like this had a bunch of repairs and they were done half-ass. Why wasn't on the disclosure? Well, that would be negligence, right? So this is where it comes into making sure that you fully disclose everything you did on the property. Other than that, who's negligent and how is that determined? That's going to be determined by the court, isn't it? You're eventually, if the seller wants to fight you, that's what litigation is for. Because after the purchase and sell agreement, we're no longer, mediation is no longer applies. Contracts have fulfilled their fiduciary responsibility to each other. And so moving on from here, if there's an issue from here that doesn't go to mediation between the board of realtors or, or a board of equal magnitude, it would go straight to litigation. Okay. So here we got to have the lead-based paint addendum and make sure that's it. What is construction? Do they know the wood frame? Sometimes they may not know. They may click other and just say buyer to verify. Maybe they don't know what kind of construction it is because they've only owned it 3 years and it's inside it. Maybe they bought it and I'm not frame. Is it a manufactured? Is it a modular? What is the foundation type? Masonry, poured concrete, piling, treated wood, other. Do they know the name of the builder? So some basics. And again, they may have other buyer to verify. They may not know. Not everybody is really savvy. You'd be surprised at how many people, I've had people own property. I didn't know my house was all weather wood foundation. Yes, it is. It's okay. All weather wood foundation houses are actually really, really good in earthquake zones and are oftentimes superior to concrete block given the soil, depending on soil structure. But, all right, here, property features. What other kinds of questions? Check all items that are built in. So they check everything that must be built in, and they got to circle those items that have known defects or malfunctions. Okay. If the washing machine occasionally, or let's see, these are built in, right? So if you have oven ranges and one of the burners doesn't work, you would have to check it, circle it, right? Cooktop, and then write on the addendum or down here, one burner doesn't work. You're supposed to disclose these things. And again, microwaves, dishwasher, trash compactor, garbage disposal, fans. Guys, if you have stuff that doesn't work in your house, you're required to disclose that you know it doesn't work. Okay? And you don't take this stuff lightly. Don't think that, you know what, I thought it worked. Okay? But if they can prove that it hasn't been working for a while, it gets ugly. Okay? Structural components, the same thing applies. Check only those items that are known to have defects, malfunctions, or have had major repairs performed in the last 5 years. Now, a repair can be an upgrade, right? If you replaced all your floors or replaced the flooring, went from carpet to VRP, you would check this and say, hey, 2 years ago I put in VRP flooring. In the crawl space, I put in new vapor barrier. You would check that. I did vapor barrier. Maybe you had water in the crawl space and you had to add a sump pump. Boom, click, check it. It had defects, right? Water in. And then what repairs or defects or what did you do to fix it? So then what happens is it tells you to go to the additional page, and what there is at the very last page on this. You can get this. You can write this as many times as you want. Page 00. That means that you can print this and you can do 5 of these. If you have to, you will fill 5 of these pages out, sign them, and date them. This would be, hey, on page 2, I said there was water in the crawl space in 2019, and I fixed it by extending the rain gutters and adding a sump pump. And maybe maybe you attach to it your invoices, okay? If you see crawl space checked, but there's nothing on page 2, buyer, be very curious about what the hell they were doing in the crawl space. So read through this. Doors, ceilings, you'll see there's everything here. Plumbing systems, heating systems, even stuff that we read, solar panels, which you rarely ever see up here, okay? Ventilation systems, swimming pool. They even have a swimming pool in here, okay? So all your different components to the property, they got to disclose, okay? Now, are there any documents that the seller has. Do they have any of these, which are material information, which would be property report, title information, as-built survey, written agreements with adjacent property owners. This would be a shared driveway. Maybe you guys share the fence. You have a written agreement, okay? If the seller has these things, they're required to attach them and check the box. Not enough people read this. By the way, if you use this on a duplex, triplex, or want to use these on a fourplex, right here is rental lease agreements. Attach the rental lease agreements. If you want, you can scratch out the individual's names, but at least you should be having the contracts in there. Are there any well logs? Is there any hazardous materials? So this goes in, and this is documentation. And the seller, if they have any of these, is required to check it and then provide it as part of it. If they have them and they don't check it and they don't provide it when they've been specifically asked if they have any of these, okay, what is that? Well, that falls into this. They're negligently violating or fails to perform a duty required. You were specifically asked, you had them in your possession, and you didn't cough them up. Well, go cough them up. Okay? So, additional information. To the best of your knowledge, has the property been inspected by an engineer, home inspector, in the last 5 years? If you've owned the property 4 years and you had a home inspection when you bought it, you would have, and then you should be providing a copy of the home inspection. If you can't find it, make a note and say, I checked my records, I couldn't find it, I don't know where it is. But at least still check yes, and then you can write on here, I cannot find a copy of the report, I searched diligently. Yes, we're going to get into that. Corey, would HOA rules be part of this agreement? It's a part of this. Yes, and that goes into another disclosure we're going to talk about, which when we finish this, we're going to talk about HOA disclosures. That's an excellent question, Corey Willis. Okay. Additional information, drainage. Are you aware of there being water in the crawl space? Okay. Are there sump pumps? If there is water, how did you solve the problem? Where is a sump pump? Where does the water drain to? Are there downspouts? If gutters, where do the downspouts discharge? Okay, is there a floor drain in the structure, including the garage? Where is it? Where does it drain to? You can just, I don't know, it drains in the sewer. How old is the roof? Again, are you aware of any water leaking into the home? Any windows, lights, fireplaces? Yes, explain any history of water leaking into the home. Okay, the thing that frustrates me is people just check, and it just, you see no everything. It's like they didn't even read it. They didn't put forth. You should be very, very cautious if you're a buyer and you get one of these and it's like no one put any effort into actually reading these questions. They just marked no, didn't check any boxes and spit it back to you. Okay. Okay. I would either ask them to make sure and say, hey, I want to verify that you're going to tell me you don't know the age of the heating system. You couldn't walk down to the boiler and just look at it. Like couldn't read the sticker on the hot water heater. Like you couldn't figure that out. Did you put any effort into it? Okay. Are you aware of me? Ice damming, fireplace or wood stove. Were they last cleaned? Who cleaned it? Heating system. What are the type? Electric. What is the age? Is there an oil tank? Is there storage? So you see there's a lot of great questions in here, okay? Some of the things that you want to look at are there water rights certificates with the property, right? Do you have a water supply? Do you receive water rights from? You might have a community well, right? In which case, what kind of water supply? Public, private, community, okay? Well, guess what? You guys are going to love this because if it's on a community well and they go, I don't know, do you know all your community well information for any community well that serves more than 7 houses is available on the Muni website? What's that you say, Kevin? Yeah, let me show you something real quick, right? So just go to Alaska DEC maps. Yeah, let's try the maps. Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC web maps. Come on, watch this. You guys are going to be totally amazed by this. All maps. All right, we're going to go down here. We're going to go drinking water progressions, Fairbanks, drinking water programs, DEC floods, drinking water wildfires, nitrates, DEC contaminated sites, challenge community manner. Let's see, where's the one on community wells? DEC quality, DEC drinking water wildfires, drinking water nitrates. Let's try, no, I don't think it's the nitrates one. File samples, DEC debris, DEC nominated. Let's try, oh, it's in here somewhere. DEC drinking water protected areas? No, distributed web map. Let's see if the web map. I love the DEC website, by the way. It's totally awesome. There's so much information on here regarding test holes. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in here, all your test holes and everything and all your COSAs and all your results can be found. So in here, oh, here we go. Here's your, oh, here we go. We're getting into it now. Yep, here we go. Look, here's all your community wells. Oops, I got a little too crazy. Look at this. Here is all your community wells in the area they service and where the water comes from. So you got all your community wells. So here's a little community well that services some houses, and here it is. It's a water system, municipality, small service area, DBE, and you can go into and you can look at the drinking water map, DEC water program. You can find out how many houses and what houses it suffers. And then this is the water area that they're saying all the water feeds to. So you'll see here's the well and it kind of opens up. They're saying that it drains, and that is what they consider the drainage field for that one. Look at how many different community wells are all around town. Of course, there's a ton on the hillside. But if you're buying a house that's on a community well, or you're looking at a property that's up there, or it's a foreclosure and you want to know what the well water is, well, guess what? The great thing is you can just zoom on some of these and just click on it and you can find all the water results. So in here somewhere, you've got all the water results, because community wells servicing 7 houses or more are required to fill in the record those with the DEC on their annual reports. All right. Anyway, lots of great stuff on our state website. If you didn't know, there's a plethora of information that is mind-blowing. Okay, so if it is a water supply, is it a community? What kind of form is it? If you don't know the well depth because it's community well, guess what? Go to DEC website. Maybe you can do some research on your own. They are not required to look this up for you. That is a public website. Remember, they're not required to tell you what to do. You just, your job if you want to know. Now, in a community well, the lender is going to make sure that they have a copy of the annual report, and that'll have to go to your lender, and it'll have to be done through title as well. And so even if it is a community well, they still have to provide you the test results that was done by the HOA that runs the well. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Sewer type, is it public, private, community, other? All the questions regarding the sewer type. And we can go in, we'll talk about COSAs later, but any property that transfers the municipality of Anchorage, guys, any property in the municipality of Anchorage is required to have a COSA test, okay? It is not required to pass. You can still purchase the property even if it fails. But it has to have a COSA, and it has to have a test, and it has to have, even if it fails, okay? Why do you think the municipal, now, do people get them done all the time? No, okay? Because it's not the job of title companies to enforce these. If you're a willing buyer and you want to buy it and you're a cash buyer, but your lender or whoever may get involved and say, hey, listen, you got to have a COSA or we're not closing it. Why would the municipality of Anchorage specifically require that septic system and that well system be tested, inspected, and certified by the state? And that's what COSA means, certification of on-site system approval. Why would they require that? It's because it's a huge health issue. If your septic system fails and it's putting poop stuff down into the ground around it, you know, there may be a well that's 100 feet away, and you may be putting some, you know, your leach field's not working. The pipe may have become disconnected from the leach field during the earthquake. They've owned it for 5 years. They don't know they're dumping sewage into the underground aquifers, and it could be, you know, causing issues. So they require those issues. They require that those be inspected. Okay, so COSAs are big here, and they haven't really pushed because it's such the lots are so much bigger and more spread out, but specifically in Anchorage. By the way, every COSA that's done, you can go in the DEC web map and you can look to find out the background history. They take all that information, they file them with the Muni, and the Muni uploads them into the DEC websites. And you can go in there and you can find all the well logs of properties that they've been sold. Now, the information only goes back about 8 or 9 years because that's as long as they've been keeping records and having the internet and having a website to do it. But all that information is putting on there, and pretty soon, think about another 10 years goes by, and you'll be able to check whole neighborhoods, check nitrate levels. There's a nitrate map on there. There's tons of stuff on well and septic. It's pretty stinking awesome. So much information. Our Muni does such a great job of organizing environmental data and real estate property data on our website. You should just get in there and play around. Okay. Going back in here, okay, are there any freeze ups? Utility costs, title issues. And we're going to talk about the importance of title. Do you know of any existing or pending legal actions concerning the property? Okay, now this is important to note. If you have an HOA and you're in a condo and there's a legal action regarding it, that may prevent your ability to even get a loan on it. You know, you can't get a loan on an HOA that's involved in a lawsuit. The banks are going to go, well, I don't want to do that. Why? Because you are basically becoming a party to the lawsuit by joining the HOA. Is there any road maintenance, and who is the road maintenance provided by? Is your property currently rented or leased? When is the rent expiration dates? We asked about HOA. Is there a homeowners association? Who is it? What is their phone number? Is it voluntary, active? What are the dues and when are they due? Are there any levied or pending assessments? That means, is there any money owed to them for improvements? And who is responsible for issuing the resale certificate? This would be the name of the company. It'd be Hoffman and Associates, PMSI. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones that are out there. Those are two. Roy Briley Property Management, right? Who does it? And who's going to get the responsibility of the resale certificate? Okay. Now, in acreage, usually, and per the contract, the seller provides this to the buyer. Are there cases where the seller does not provide the resale certificate? Yes, REOs, real estate owned properties. Okay, bank owned properties do not provide the resale certificate. It's your job, Mr. Buyer, to go buy it and make sure that the rules, right, that you're okay with that. Setbacks and restrictions, property zoning changes. Have there been notified any proposed zoning changes for the property? That's an important one to know. Is there anything shared in common with any of the business owners? So you can see as we get back, we get into some nitty gritty here, don't we? Are there any building code violations? Are there any non-conforming uses? These are all really critical, but the setback and restrictions. Now, just because they say no doesn't mean they don't exist. Be very cautious. Are you aware of any deed or private restrictions, easements on the property? Now, here's what's great. This can also be a checklist for your due diligence. See all these questions? These are all fantastic title questions. So when you get your preliminary title report, even if it says no and you're like, what am I looking for? I just got a title report, Kevin. What am I looking for? You're looking for these things. You're looking for anything that may have been filed against the property, a setback restriction or anything, because they're going to show up on there. In fact, easements are recorded against the property and they show up in the title report, okay? Again, does anything on your property encroach on your neighbor's property? Is anything on your neighbor's property encroaching onto yours? And then environmental concerns, soil stabilities, construction improvements, pest control. Does it ever have bed bugs? Ants, insects, vermin, rodent structure? If yes, where? Has there been any damage from any press? Yes. Are there any murders or suicides having occurred in the property the last 3 years? Are there human burial sites on the property? Okay. Are you hearing any noises? And have there been any pets? Okay. So those are all the things that go in there. Okay. Now, that's a lot of questions, isn't there? That's a lot of information that a seller has to fill out and make a reasonable effort to ascertain. So again, that's the first start. That's just the first form that we start off and you go through. Once you take a look at that disclosure, okay, again, you typically only see them with single family and duplexes. You get into larger properties where it's an estate sale, an inheritance property. No, they don't know, which is why it's still really, really important to get a home inspection, right? However, on most properties where it's been owner occupied and you got an active owner and they're very well and they know the property really well, or maybe in the case where it's a rehab or flip, you may just ask them to fill that out. There's a lot of really useful information in there. And if they did their job and they did their due diligence, they should know most of these answers. Yes, it's understandable that a little old lady who's been living in her house for 20 years, some of these questions may just overwhelm her. Okay, get a home inspection. What should you do if you find an open permit from maybe a previous owner on the property, assuming the current owner doesn't know anything about it? I understand the community is getting harder. Yep, that happens all the time, Jesse. You just, you write an addendum, and on the repair amendment, you say, seller to have the open permit labeled so-and-so closed. And I would just make it part of the repair amendment that they're to close it out. You as a buyer may or may not want to deal with closing out a permit. Why? Because it may open up a whole Pandora's box. They may go, well, this permit wasn't closed. We got to do an on-site inspection. They go out there and do a site inspection and go, well, we've decided we want a code compliance study. You want that nightmare on the seller. So if you're buying a property and you find an open permit, I would just make it part of your negotiation for repairs or remedies, that the seller would close out the permit and you make reference to what it is. Okay, and that does happen. And the most common one is heating system replacement or upgrades where they forgot to close one out, and roofs. Those are the two biggest ones. All right. So let's go in. So the first thing you do is you thoroughly investigate. And what was that? Heating system inspections and roofs are the two permits that are most commonly they forget to close out. Okay. All right. Okay. So once you take a look at that, ask the seller to clarify any statements or anything so that you have understanding, and then you proceed. What is the next thing you're going to want to take a look at? You're probably going to want to see if there's an as-built, or the next thing, and that might be part of title. Okay. Let's go take a look at a preliminary title report. Once we get into contract, the second most important disclosure is the title report. Okay, guys, what is a title report? The title report is everything legal surrounding a property. It's all the legal mumbo jumbo. Okay, so give me just a second, and I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to open up a title report. All right, if you give me just a second, if you don't mind staring at my my glorious mug here. We're going to go into let's see what we've got here. Generated preliminary title report, Bear Ridge prelim. That's it. Oh, I got to log back in. Sorry about that. It was here, but I have to log back in. I've been absent too long and it kicked me out. Here we go. All right. Prelim. Let's take a look at it. Oh, there's no file on there. PSA, George Cosa, no wonder. Signed preliminary generated form. What is this? Give me just a second while I find the prelim. Nope, that's not it. Taxes, appraisal, home inspection, COVID, conflict of interest. It says signed prelim, property disclosures. Oh, here, let me go back. Here we go. Disclosures, purchase, earnest money, COVID, property disclosure waiver, well and septic, home inspection, business, bill say preliminary acknowledgement. Okay, what do we got here? Well, all right. Here, we're gonna go to an old file and look at an old title report here. So we can take a look at one real quick. Forgive my delay. I'm just looking for a copy of an open title report that we can, or an old one. Oh, here we go. All right. All right, very good. Okay, I'm gonna bring up a title report. And excellent. Okay. Let's do share screen. All right, get ready. We're going to take a look at a title report. So the property, right? So this one is referred from Stewart Title, and it says who is the licensees involved and what is the bank involved. And then it says, hey, this is what it is. What is the commitment to issue policy? So they're going to warranty the title. Who are the officers involved? Okay, what are the commitment conditions? So here's your definitions. What is a mortgage? What is a policy? Demo. Liability of the company must be based on a commitment. So we've got pro forma, arbitration. Okay, so if you have arbitration, well, this is proposed amount up to 2 million in arbitration, so they're covering you in insurance. It's going to give all the provisions of the insurance, right? But what we're looking at when we first get in there is we're first going to take a look at it and say, okay, what is the policies, who's involved, what is the purchase price, what is the legal, make sure all the legal and everything is addressed. I'm trying to scan over this too much because some of that is not necessarily, okay. Then we get into conditions, general exceptions. What are the exceptions? Any defect in adverse claim or other material that appears for the first time in the public records or is created, attached, or disclosed between the commitments date. Means if it happened afterwards. Okay? So what are the exceptions? And then we get into what are the issues. So this is where we start seeing the stuff. The Schedule B on a title report is where you start seeing things. No mineral rights. Okay? There are taxes due on the property and how much is still outstanding. Okay? Assessments due by, okay? Paid developer, no, okay? There used to be a special assessment for a sewer trunk line, but it's been paid. There is a right-of-way for Chuyak Electric, meaning that there's an electrical easement on the property. There is a water easement on the property. Okay? It says that there is reservation of half all oil, gas, and other mineral deposits recorded on deed. That means the state reserves the oil and gas and mineral deposits, right? Any additional items? Are there any slope easements? Well, it says according to this, there shall be reserved adjacent the dedicated streets shown here a slope reservation easement of 1.5 feet horizontal, 1 foot, or a fill cut above the purpose of providing and maintaining route sports constructed streets. So you got a little slope easement on the edge of the property. Is there a right of way? Yes, additional right of way. Covenants. Building energy standards. Okay, there is a per 101 that was issued on this property in August 23rd of 1996. Okay, and then what is there's a notice of a wetlands permit. So this property used to be on a wetlands and they converted it. Okay, and they converted it in February of 1998. Would it be important for you to read this and note that that they had a wetlands permit to build these houses? Yes, you would want to know this house used to be sitting on wetlands. Okay, well, then what would that mean? That means you probably want to make sure that you have a sump pump in this property, right? So those are all the provisions, and it even says how much the note is owned by the seller, and then it goes into additional examination. So those are some of the things you're going to find in a title report. The most important thing is you want to make sure that who the seller's name that has the right to convey the title is who is signing your contracts. Okay? If you buy a property and you buy it from Larry McGillicuddy and the title report says the property is owned by McGillicuddy LLC, does Larry McGillicuddy have the right to sell for McGillicuddy LLC? Maybe, maybe not. If it's in an LLC, the title is going to trigger and go, hey, we need the articles of organization. We need to make sure that Larry has the right to sign for his LLC. Who's to say he didn't sell the LLC and the assets are in it, right? What is a per 101? And you said, okay, a per 101 is an inspection and it's a construction statute that came out. So if we take a look at it, Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. So what is a per 101? Just so you guys know real quick, I always just, in order to get real specific, I just Google stuff. Okay, so a per 101 right here. Oh, there's a per 102. Let's go back. Okay, Alaska Building Energy Efficient Standards means that the house has to meet a minimum efficiency standard for construction. So any new construction in Alaska must pass a per 101 and then in compliance with the B's, I can't remember what B's stand for. Looks like Energy Conservation Code in Alaska specific. Anyway, it's the minimum energy efficiency for a property being built in the municipality of Anchorage, okay? So there's a minimum standard, and that means it passed at the time of construction. So the title report is going to then reveal to you those things. Now, additionally, in the title report, sometimes you have you will have covenants and restrictions, okay? What kind of things would you find that are really important? Maybe the seller doesn't know, but would you find in a title report or in the covenants and restrictions that you won't find in a residential property transfer disclosure statement? Do you want to have chickens? Chickens are, I gotta understand how many people want to have chickens. I never realized there's like this whole chicken, this underground chicken movement. Anyway, if you want to have chickens, if you want to have poultry, maybe you want to breed alpacas on your, who knows? Okay, that's going to show up in your covenants and restrictions. You want to have horses? Some properties allow for horses, some don't. You want to run an Airbnb out of your house? Some covenants and restrictions prohibit the use of Airbnbs out of residential housing. I ran into that out in Wasilla. I was trying to sell this house out in Wasilla, and they wouldn't allow for any kind of rental usage whatsoever. The covenants and restrictions were really, really egregious. And you wouldn't think you'd run into that out in Wasilla, that they wouldn't allow you to run any kind of rental business or sublet any kind of part or run any kind of business out of your house. They had very, very, very stringent covenants and restrictions. And there was a little group of little old ladies that just drove around in a golf carts or their four-wheelers and just got in everybody's business and really enforced them aggressively. And it made that property really difficult to sell. Because most people living out in Wasilla just want freedom away from anybody, don't want anybody poking their nose in their business. All right. So you've got so first off, residential property transfer disclosure statement. Second, you're going to want to make sure you get a good title report, which you don't typically get until you're in contract because it costs money. It's $250 non-refundable to get a title report preliminary. And when you get that preliminary title report, the next thing you want to make sure is in there, particularly if you're buying a property, it's not one is, and I would say more strongly on single family houses, you're going to want to make sure that you get a as-built. Okay, so as-built. Let's see if I can find you an as-built real quick. Here's an old one. Same property. It was in the title report. So what I'm gonna do is share screen real quick. Let's show you an as-built for this little property here. Share screen. This is what an as-built looks like. This is an old one. It was hand drawn. Some of them are a little newer, a little easier to read. Oops. Okay, so on this one here, what you're gonna see is it's gonna say, okay, here's the driveway. From the corner of the house, it's 20 feet to the edge of the driveway. Oh, here's the 20-foot utility easement. The shed sits in utility easement. Here is the deck. There is a fence here, and the fence is 5 feet off the edge. It looks like it sits right on the property line, not an issue. What are some things you might look at? So I'm going to show you this one. Let's Brook Ridge. I'm going to show you. All right, see this one. Here's an as-built. Look at this one. You guys should be able to see this one here, right? Now, if you look at this one, I want you to see something. Here's the property line. What do we see happens right here, right? And I'm going to download this real quick, and then we're going to blow it up a little bit bigger. There we go. Now I can blow it up bigger. Guys, look at this. So here's one, and look, what do we see about this fence? Where is it? It's outside the property line, isn't it? It's outside the easement, and it's outside, and it encroaches into this guy's yard. Is that talk to, hey, you got any issues, right? Here's what I have seen, and this is where it gets scary, is the guy buys a house, goes, my yard is huge. They find out the fence goes way out here into a neighbor's yard. Maybe this guy behind here owns an acre of land, okay? And this fence, for whatever reason, went 10 feet off into the neighbor's yard, in which case you may have you may feel like your yard is much larger than it actually is if that fence ever goes away. That neighbor has a right to come over here and goes, get your crappy fence out of my yard, right? So this is a real good example of things to look at in an as-built. Where is the shed? The shed sits almost right on the property line. And then again, we've got some encroachments here. setbacks, restrictions. If you ever see a house where they added a carport or they added a shed and that stuff, you just want to make sure. So in this case, not only does the fence go outside the property line, but the shed sits in 2 different easements. Sits not only in the telephone and electrical easement, but it also sits in the 7-foot, and it just says plat easement. This might be a gas line that runs down between the 2 houses, but there's 2 easements. And right here, it intersects and sits in 2 different easements. Okay. And then we've got a 3-foot easement right here, and this easement sees plat. So now we've got an easement here, a 3-foot between the 2 properties that this fence sits in. So there's lots of encroachments and lots of things going on with this as-built. Is that a problem? Maybe. Talk to the neighbors. Maybe the neighbors don't even really freaking care. They're like, well, no, the fence has been there for 15 years. I don't care a squat. But if it is encroaching to other people's yards, maybe that's something as far as your due diligence you want to have done prior to closing on the property. All right, we got a couple questions. Okay, is an as-built and a survey the same thing? Yes, typically speaking, we say an as-built or a current survey. By the way, if you're getting a COSA and you get a certification of on-site system inspection, they require this in order to get a COSA. So if you don't have a current as-built, they're going to require you to get a new as-built. Looks like the house itself might be in the 7-foot utility easement. 6'8", 6 foot. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Just barely. But you know what? It was good at the time of construction. So I doubt, this is one of those things where you look on the title report and see if there's any note, but they're probably not going to enforce. They're probably not going to enforce anything like that. I mean, it's 6'6", 6'8". But you're right. There's a 7-foot easement there, and the edge of the house sits in it. All right. But you're right. He says, yeah, but if the neighbors sell, you're right. If the neighbors sell their house, they may have an issue. So in which case, let's say that your shed or something encroached or went into the neighbor's yard, and this guy's okay with it. You're going to want to get a written agreement with that neighbor before either one of you sells. Otherwise, the new guy may come along and make your life hell. Okay. If you had a carport that extended, you had something that you have a shared driveway. See how this driveway is kind of narrowed? What if his driveway went straight and encroached into this guy's lot, but he didn't care? You would want to make sure that you entered into a shared driveway agreement, okay, so that you had something in agreement with writings and then record it against the property. So if he ever sells, it'll show up on the title report that he entered into a written agreement with you, and that way he doesn't come in here and carve up your driveway and say, I want my driveway back. I think we've all seen those horror stories on Facebook or in different aspects, okay? So this is your as-built, okay? Now, are there other things? Yes, there's a host of other things you're going to want to have disclosed. Now, this is just on residential, okay? What are some additional, my lamp is going crazy here. What are some additional things if you're buying a property you're going to want to have disclosed to you? Obviously, and we talked about that in the residential property transfer disclosure, have they had the heating system inspected in the last year? That's another municipality of Anchorage requirement. In fact, I think it's a state requirement, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the heating system has been inspected in the last 12 months. That is prevent someone from dying from carbon monoxide, right? People, in the garage, we have that vent that goes outside and people stuff rags in it, and then the heating system can't breathe and it sucks air off the freaking house. Are you okay? Has it been inspected in the last 12 months to make sure that somebody, is not providing carbon monoxide poisoning? I'm trying to think of any other, and the most important, not most important, but one of the really important items is lease agreements. Typically, when you write a contract, that seller should have those lease agreements together and provide those to you within 72 hours of an agreement. Why? Because when you buy a rental property, to honor those contracts, okay? And this is this is where you could be doing yourself harm, and you could be doing if in preparation of selling a property, you say, you know what, I really like my tenants, and I'm going to renew all the leases and put them on 1-year leases before I sell, so the tenants know that they're going to be good here and they're going to be well taken care of. Well, you just cut your hands off. I mean, you just cut your nose off to spite your face, because or however that analogy is, because you have no idea what the next buyer's intention is for that property. But they're obligated to honor your leases, and they may intend to move a family member. They may specifically looking to owner occupy and put a family member in another unit. And here you obligate them and they can't do it. Or, you know, they may want to take a couple of your units and gut them or totally remodel them, fully furnish them because they have a connection with somebody who does fully furnished executive rentals, like for 5 and 6 months. And because you extended those contracts, so you got to be very careful about extending and signing long-term leases on properties that you're preparing to sell. I encourage you just to let them revert back to month and let them sit. Yeah, but all the neighbors sell and you found the lenders don't like it. Lend LLC for resident. Okay, what is that? So Nick Regal, what does he say? But if the neighbors sell and you found that the lenders don't like to lend LLC for resident, well, you can't. So, I mean, on residential properties, you're not going to get an LLC. I mean, you're probably not going to get an LLC loan. You have to close because it has to do with who's on recourse for the loan. And on residential properties, they're looking at you, the individual, to pay it back. Okay. Now you can buy it as an individual and then quit claim it into an LLC, but you as an individual are still recourse for the loan. Okay. It gets a little more complicated. We can get LLC laws where you can actually go in and, you know, maybe you can do a pass-through LLC, and there's different things, but that typically goes to commercial real estate. But typically speaking, if you're buying duplex, triplex, fourplex and under, you're not buying that with an LLC. Okay. Getting to commercial real estate is a little different, but I can only think of a handful of, like, I've been doing real estate for, I don't know, 16, 20 years, several hundred transactions a year for very long. And I can probably count on one hand, even if I'm missing a couple fingers, LLCs that purchase fourplexes and smaller strictly through an LLC. Not that it doesn't happen, but you're right that residential lenders don't like messing with that. That would not be through your standard residential mortgage. That would be a commercial mortgage on a residential property. Okay. Yeah, we talked a lot about disclosures. Those are separate. Okay, thanks. So we talked a lot about disclosures. Now, guys, that's a lot of information that you need to be researching. Do you need to get a new agreement in place for an encroachment on a property easements with new neighbors? No, not if you record it with the current owner. So, like, if my neighbor next door decides to build a big deck, and his deck extends onto my property because I own 3 acres. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about the corner of my property. And we enter into a written agreement and I give him right to encroach on my property. And then we go down to the recorder's office or we go to a title company and we ask the title company to record this against the property. Then when I go to sell my house, it's part of the title report. And the buyer would see the previous owner entered into a lifelong agreement that for the life of that deck, as long as it's there, he permits them to have their deck there indefinitely. As long as I, as owner of this land, give him permission in writing, have it notarized, then go down to a title company and have it amended as part of the title or as part of a plat note, then no. The next owner can't come back and go, well, I don't like it. It's like, no, you were disclosed. That was an agreement, much like a lease agreement. When you buy a property, you're obligated to honor the terms of a lease agreement. You might say it's like that. I just gave him permission for much longer than a year. Now, what are your thoughts on the due on sale clause when quit claiming a property to an LLC? I've never seen it. I have yet to see any due on sale when quit claiming to an LLC. Okay, I've yet to see it. They know what happens. They know, and I can tell you, like, the only time I've ever seen, and it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Okay, this is just my personal experience. Okay, and I've seen a lot. I buy properties and I quit claimed them in my wife's name, so my name wasn't on them, so that I could go refinance different stuff and then quit claim it back in my name. I've done some really creative stuff, right? I have only seen a lender trigger the due on sale clause, okay, when someone didn't make payments. When they had a 30 or 40 day late, you hit a 30-day late and they're like, we didn't get paid. Why aren't we getting paid? They have the right, and they'll do a quick title search. They can go on the assessment and they'll look to say, hey, who's on title? Who is this Poodle Grooming LLC? We gave the loan, to Kevin Cross, and now it's in the name of Poodle Groom LLC. And he just missed a mortgage payment. Oh, that's dangerous. Due on sale. They will immediately, they'll call it due. Just pay your mortgage, man. Pay your mortgage. Solves a lot of issues. Okay, but that's typically what triggers them to look at that. Now, is it to say that they might not enforce it? No, I mean, technically they have the right to. It just rarely does. They can also do something like this. Let's say it's in your name, and then you go create an LLC with articles of organization saying that you're on title for the LLC, and then you quit claim it into it. Well, look, guys, it's this simple, right? We're going to do a share screen with you real quick. You guys ready for some more share screen fun? Okay. One thing the bank might do, okay, is, and this is really, by the way, this is fun if you ever want to find out who owns a property, right? Let's say that you're doing a tax assessment, and let's say search of a property, it's the name of an LLC. We'll just do Alaska Corporation search. Search the database of corporations and see right here, boom. You go search corporation. What is the name of it? I'm trying to think what's West 29th Place LLC. Is that mine? No results. I'm trying to remember the name of one of my LLCs. Oh, there we go. Alaska Rent Ready in good standing. This is the name of the company. So I created a contracting company to work on my flips. And if you go in, and let's say I were to take one of my properties and quit claim it into Alaska Rent Ready, I'm getting properties ready. Oh, look, you can see Cross and Associates. There's my other one and who did it. And if you click and you go into filing, they can look to see who owns it, right? And who filed Kevin Cross. So the bank may say, well, Kevin Cross bought the property and he quit claimed it into Alaska Rent Ready LLC, but guess who's responsible for all the debts of Alaska? Okay, it's Kevin Cross. They'll probably let it slide. In that particular case, they would not probably call the note due because all I did was put it in the name of an LLC, which I'm still fully responsible for, right? And it'd be really hard getting out of that one. Right. What they don't like is if they were to search on an LLC and see that you're nowhere on that LLC. You're not even a partnership. Basically, you quit claimed an LLC in which you have no liabilities, almost like a wrap. In which case, if you miss a mortgage payment and they do a search of the LLC and you don't have any ties to that LLC, they may do a due on sale. But I have seen them question and go, hey, you quit claimed into an LLC, and the buyer provided information, said, I'm still liable for the debts to the LLC. And okay, let me just let it slide. Just pay your mortgage. Okay. Any other questions? We have about 6 minutes here on disclosures. Go ahead and write your questions into that. Again, that residential property transfer disclosure statement is huge. Again, another aha is you can go on and you can find out. Oh, here, I do want to share this. Just because, real quick, go ahead and throw them in there. In the meantime, what I have found to be a huge question is, Kevin, is there earthquake damage? Well, particularly if it's a foreclosure or something like that. Well, guess what? FEMA website, DEC again, we're going to go to DEC maps. Did you know that every earthquake damaged property that's been registered or acknowledged by the muni is available on the DEC? What you say? Yes, I said. So if we go into the DEC website, drinking water, you can go to contamination sites. Fairbanks drinking water, tsunami, where's the earthquake map? Let's find it. Seafood processors, quality, communities, contamination, drinking water, and earthquakes. No, we want FEMA. drinking water, wildfires, nitrates, boiling water, program regions, Fairbanks, plumes. Where is the FEMA website? Let's do this. Let me show you what you're, let me show you this one. We're going to go back a little bit, okay? We're going to do, all right. This is probably one of my favorite. This is the MOA grid maps, okay? I love the grid maps. Now in there, you can put in FEMA as well, but the grid maps is probably the one I use the most. I use this map at least twice a day. And we're talking about disclosures, right? And let's just take a look at an area of Anchorage and see what we can find. So you just find your property on the grid and you grid it up and you get really nitty gritty and you're looking to buy a property, do an improvement. And by the way, everything you want to know. Where is the storm drain, address, platting, water mains, wastewater, streetlight zoning, wetland maps, everything is available here. So if you're a rehab or flipper and you're looking to do something. So here's something interesting. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Did you know that if you are buying a property with a VA loan and the property is on a well, that if the cost to tie that property into city water is less than 10% of the purchase price, you will be required to tie it into the city water. What you say? Yes, that is correct. So let's say you're buying a house in an area of Anchorage and it's on a well, but hey, wait a second. Is there water in the area and is it close? You may be required to tie it into. So if we go in here and we just pick a house, and I'm looking at this one here, and like, I want to know where the water map is. Well, I can click on the water map, it downloads it, bring it up here, and here are all the water mains. Here is all the water mains, and then here's your little ledger. Here is your where your cleanouts are. Here's an AWW well. If there is a well, like if they, you know, I don't know if you well it, but the AWW has well locations around town. But here's all your water maps. If we go back to the same grid and you want to know where wastewater and the sewer is, boom, download the map. Here's all your sewer maps, and here are the manhole covers and everything, and here are your check valves, and here are the pump stations, and all your major. And this one's owned by AWW. Is there one that's non-AWW, right? Forced main. Here is the flow of travel. It even has arrows, like which direction does it travel? What area is the turd flowing, right? So all your maps are available on those. Guys, you would, again, there is so much information on the MOA website. Water mains, sewer mains, wetlands, everything that you can possibly imagine. FEMA websites, houses that have been registered, that it was to say, on DEC maps, type Control F and search for earthquake. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Dustin. Right? Guys, there's so much information, including, you get in there long enough, you can find the COSAs, the well logs, everything. So if you're like, I don't know, kind of a crazy stalker and like to dig into stuff and kind of like just get nosy in your neighbor's business, I kind of hang out on there and find everything that I can. I really, really enjoy it. All right. But we talked a lot about disclosures. We talked about different resources where you can find information. We talked about why it's so important that you read the residential property transfer disclosure statement, why it's so important that you take a look at as-built as well as title reports. And we're going to wrap up right here. Thanks so much. You're awesome. I love being called awesome. Thank you. Anyway, guys, again, I'm going to take this minute just to come back, and I hope you don't mind if I stroke my own chest hair here. But this is why it's so important that regardless of whether it's me or whoever else, Jesse Knight is in the group. He's a phenomenal licensee as well, that you use a really good experienced real estate professional. I know you guys think that, you know, I know a lot of people are like, gosh, they seem expensive. Guys, you know, we're a lot less expensive than an attorney trying to help you iron these things out. And just knowing where these resources are and helping us make sure that you're wildly successful is worth it. Again, this is why I encourage you that in real estate, you just like you build that team, find a really, really informed real estate salesperson to help you, work with a really good title company that you can trust, find a home inspector who owns investment properties and has good experience. I will tell you there's good and bad home inspectors out there. Just because they're ASHI certified does not mean they're worth a kill of beans. Build that team around you of those resources that you can pull and make them your easy button. Also, just know where these tools are because there's a lot of awesome stuff out there. All right, guys, I'm gonna let you go. If you have any specific questions, okay, I love helping people. My email is kevin@alaskarex.com, kevin@alaskarex.com. You have an issue, you have a question, okay, I'm happy just to point you in the right direction or tell you what resources I use in these cases. I just want you guys to be wildly successful and, and I just love what real estate can do. And if I can help you out, fantastic. All right, guys, we're out of here. Thanks for showing up at Rex. I'll talk to you later. Peace.